The latest two Space Marine detachments and associated characters have now officially had their rules released, and they are also up for grabs as we speak, so if you do want to get them, then do go and grab them. But in today's video, we're going to take a look at one of them, and we are going to start with the Swift and the Mobile White Scars and their brand new Spearhead Task Force Detachment, along with their new jet bike mounted character, Suboden Khan, who is the master of the First Brotherhood for the White Scars. As we've done with the other detachments, we'll take a look at his datasheet first and the rules that he brings along, and he does actually have quite a lot of interaction with the new detachment itself, which is based, as many people assumed it would be, on the Stormlance task force from the main codex. He just adds a bit more spice to it, which does make him, if you are bringing this detachment, a very welcome addition. So coming in at 115 points, Suboden is fairly beefy, to be honest, with his bike. He's got a 12-inch move, 8 wounds at toughness 5, so he definitely can take a punch. One of the downsides is he does only have a 3-up save, but he does of course have that standard 4-up invulnerable to help him against any big attacks with a lot of AP, and he can actually be quite resilient against small arms fire thanks to the toughness 5 and his 8 wounds. Now, he can only join Outriders, that is the only unit he can join, being on a jet bike himself, but that is not a bad unit for him to be attached to, because not only is it some more ablative wounds for him, but they can also, with their datasheet rule, boost his personal output quite significantly. Suboden has a mix of range and melee. He is primarily a melee combat character, but whilst he is zooming up the board, you do get to use his Onslaught Gatling cannon that his bike has, which throws out 8 shots at strength 5, no AP. It's only 1 damage, but it does have dev wounds, so it's definitely not nothing. You won't be wiping out entire units, but against an Oath target, he can get just under 8 hits as he is natively hitting on 2s, and then with those dev wounds, he'll turn it into about 1 mortal usually, and then with the remainder of the hits getting around 1 unsaved wound onto a toughness 4 3-up save profile. He can, on average, kill a marine whenever he shoots, and he'll kill a few, orc boys or guardsmen when he goes up, so he's not bad at helping to clear out screens and chaff. Melee, however, is where he really shines, of course, and he's got a great option for both clearing screens and chaff as well as tougher enemies. His Lance Stormtooth has 6 attacks at strength 6, minus 2 AP and 2 damage, but it also has Lance, Anti-Monster and Anti-Vehicle 4+. So he's wounding Marines and Terminators on 2s on the charge, and even those bigger scary things like monsters and vehicles, he will be needing 4s rather than the usual 5s that a lot of stuff tends to require. So yes, it is only minus 2 AP and 2 damage, so it's not super deadly, but he can get wounds through relatively easily. He will kill around 3 Marines on his own when he charges in, or if you put him with Outriders, which as I said you really should do, thanks to their Thunderous Impact rule, meaning he goes to strength 7 and 3 damage on the charge. With that profile, he can do nearly 6 wounds to an enemy tank or a monster, or wipe out just over 2 Custodian Guard by himself as he charges in. So he does have a lot of potential into quite a nice variety of targets. If instead he finds himself bogged down by chaff and hordes, he does also have a power sword. This is generally much less of a good option, but if you do want to try and get through, as many toughness 3 5-up save models as possible, that gives him 8 attacks. They're only strength 5 and 1 damage, but as I said, for clearing through a bigger unit of orc boys or guardsmen or fire warriors or something like that, that could be a better way to just get rid of them as quickly as possible. So he's fairly flexible, and he can make for something of a devastating little torpedo unit alongside a unit of Outriders. He also brings along 2 relatively nice rules on his datasheet. The Spear of Jagoras rule allows his unit to shoot and charge even after advancing or falling back. And then also, if they could already do that from another rule, they get +1 to those rolls. So if you manage to set that up, this could be getting his unit potentially a 13-inch move, a d6 plus 1-inch advance, and then a 2d6 charge. So he could turn 1, in theory, shoot off a massive 32 inches if you rolled perfectly, which does let him, even with average rolling, project a huge amount of threat onto the enemy battle lines. There is quite a big caveat to this though, and it is quite a noticeable one. His rule states that you get that bonus, the +1 to advance and charge rolls, if his unit is eligible to already shoot and declare a charge after advancing. And the main detachment rule for this new detachment, that doesn't give you the ability to shoot after advancing. It only gives you the ability to charge after you've advanced. So that wouldn't meet this criteria. So him just in the new detachment with a unit of Outriders, they don't get that +1 to the rolls. There is a strat that can allow you to shoot after advancing, so you can spend a command point to get that +1 to advance and charge rolls for his unit very, very easily. But that isn't always going to be worth it. You are going to have to weigh up whether it's worth spending one command point to essentially get 2 inches of extra movement to get into a charge or get into a combat. It's just a small thing to be aware of, because I think reading on it and reading through it quite quickly and skimming it, and I actually missed it myself at first, you do think that he will just natively get that +1 to the advance and charge roll, because you don't realize that his rule does have the caveat you also need to be eligible to shoot after advancing. He also gets the skill riders rule, which allows his unit to move, advance, fall back, or charge horizontally through terrain. So like we've seen before with some other rules, this really does help you if your opponent is trying to use terrain to block your units like your bikes and use that big unit footprint against you. They will now find that much more difficult to do so, because you can really easily just keep your unit safely tucked up behind cover, behind a wall, and then still just charge out through it and not have to go round it. So you can really use this to catch your opponent off guard. And in general, they're 2 pretty good rules. You know, getting advance and charge is really good. Being able to shoot after advancing is also very good. Getting the +1 to the rolls when you do manage to set that up is very handy. And then just being able to essentially ignore terrain when you're moving and charging makes his unit very, very difficult for your opponent to avoid. So I think he's very good. And if you are running the new Spearhead Task Force in particular, he is pretty much an auto take because of what else he brings for the detachment. So in terms of the detachment itself, as I said, it is similar in many ways to the Stormlance. The main rule, Storm Swift Onslaught, is the same as Lightning Assault. It allows your units to charge even after advancing or falling back. It's super strong, as we all know. It's going to mean your entire army is much, much quicker and better at getting into combat. Even though Suboden does bring that rule to his unit by himself, obviously this now gives it to the rest of your army. So everything you have will be moving up, being able to advance, and then still get a charge off. But to make it stand out a bit more from the Stormlance, there is also a second benefit. Now it is quite restrictive, but it is essentially just a flat upgrade over the Stormlance, so you can't really consider it a bad thing. But the second rule, Wrath of the First Khan, means that at the end of the fight phase, if Suboden Khan and his unit destroyed any enemy units this phase and isn't in engagement range, they can make a 6-inch move. So after you've advanced up and charged in, if his unit has killed their target, you can then move them at the end of the fight phase to get onto an objective or get further up the board, or even, fall back to get behind some cover if you're going into the enemy turn and you want to be a bit safer from their shooting. So it's not a huge bonus. It's not, if that was the only detachment rule, it would be pretty rubbish, but this is just a nice extra and another reason to bring Suboden in this army, because it gets him a bit more mobility and flexibility and can help you score points or keep your unit safe, or just act as a screen in the worst case scenario to protect another unit that may be at risk of getting charged next turn. In terms of the enhancements for the detachment, we do see a similar style that we've seen with these other chapter-specific detachments, where they copy a lot of the ones from the main codex ones. So Spear Point Paragon is a copy of Fury of the Storm. For the same 25 points, it gives the bearer +1 strength and AP in melee, and +2 to those stats when they've charged. So giving something like a Biker Chaplain strength 8, -3 AP, and 2 damage on the charge, which is actually quite nasty. Stormseer's Wisdom gives the bearer and his unit reroll advance rolls, which is great when you can advance and charge. It is a copy of Portents of Wisdom and the same 15-point cost. The last copied one is Chigorian Huntmaster. This is the same as Hunter's Instinct. It gives a mounted model and his unit, if they are in strategic reserves, the option to come onto the board, counting the battle round as one higher than it actually is. So just again, giving you a bit more flexibility on where on the battlefield your unit can arrive from, and potentially mess up the enemy plans a bit more easily. It's very nice and very powerful. It is quite pricey at 25 points, but if you want or need to get a unit at some specific point on the board to really improve your battle plan, this could help you do that. The only new enhancement is the 20-point Hunter's Eye. This goes on any Astartes model and it gives the bearer and his unit ignores cover and sustained hits 1 on their ranged weapons. This honestly isn't too bad. It's a solid buff for a shooter unit. Something like Sternguard or Hellblasters will really like this. It is a shame the detachment rule doesn't let you shoot after advancing, because that would be a really good way to combo with this, but it is nice as a enhancement. It can even go quite well if you go onto that biker heavy theme. A chaplain with this in a full unit of outriders and maybe an attached ATV can actually throw out an acceptable output with this. Getting ignores cover is solid on their bolt rifles, and the sustained hits is going to be really good on their bolt rifles, and even on something like the Onslaught Gatling Cannon or the Multi-Melter on the ATV. And then on the bolt rifles, of course, you've got Twin Linked, which combos very well with the Chaplain's Catechism of Fire rule that gives your guns dev wounds against a certain target. So you could, against an Oath target, be re-rolling all of your hits with Oath and re-rolling your wounds with the bolt rifles, and having, sustained hits and ignores cover. So maybe it's not going to be the most killer unit, but they certainly can do a decent bit of damage with that buff up onto the enemy. Is it the best enhancement out there? No, absolutely not. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it does have some potential. Even if you are running a purely biker list, there are some situations where this could help add some ranged output to your army. On to the stratagems now. As always, we have 6. First up, we have the ever popular Armor of Contempt, giving you that boosted durability against one set of attacks. We all know it, we all love it, and it is here to make very good use of. Spear Thrust and Saber Swing is a fight phase strat. For 1 command point, this gives the unit either lance or lethal hits, and if it's a mounted unit, you get both. So your outriders on the charge could now be +1 strength, +1 damage with lance and lethal hits, which is actually incredibly scary for a reasonably cheap unit that you can just throw up, especially with Suboden in. They could do a lot of work even into tougher targets like tanks and monsters with this strat. Mobile Lethality is the strat that gives you shoot after advancing or falling back, which again, it's not amazing most of the time. It's essentially just giving you assault for the most part, but being able to fall back and still shoot can be really handy on things like Hellblasters or Eradicators if they get locked up in combat. And of course, the strat can give Suboden's unit that +1 to advance and charge rolls now if you really think you are going to need that extra 2 inches just to get into combat. Hunter's Instinct is up next. This is a solid reactive move strat. It lets an infantry or a mounted unit move 6 inches after an enemy unit ends a move within 9 inches of them. So once again, just making your army that much more slippery, makes your opponent have a much more difficult time charging you or ensuring that you can get into a better position with your unit so that you can get onto an objective more easily or get out of line of sight of some shooting, or just set yourself up for a charge in the following turn. It is a really nice strat. Reactive moves are always great, and it's good to see one here. On the defensive front, you get evasive maneuvers. This is a rewritten ride hard, ride fast. It gives a mounted or a fly unit from your army -1 to be hit and -1 to be wounded in the enemy shooting phase. So a big unit of bikers, maybe that unit of bikers with an ATV and Suboden, they will now be incredibly durable thanks to this, meaning even the toughest firepower will have a hard time hitting you. A lot of strats that are defensive just give you -1 to be hit. The fact that this gives you -1 to be hit and -1 to be wounded for a single command point, I always think feels like a bit of a steal, because it does impact essentially 2/3 of the rolls before you get damaged. It impacts the enemy hit roll, impacts the enemy wound roll, and then you still have your save before any damage actually goes through. So it does make a big difference in terms of how much damage actually comes through to your units. The last stratagem is Withdraw and Regroup. This brings another classic strat to the roster. At the end of your opponent's fight phase, a mounted or a fly unit from your army can be put back into strategic reserves as long as it is not engaged with the enemy. So bringing even more mobility to your army, this strat will really let your bikes and your speeder units dip in and out wherever you need them to be and show up to score you secondaries or more easily score primary objectives. It can even be used to potentially pull an enemy out of position, and then you get rid of that unit so that that enemy unit is left out essentially high and dry in the open, ready to be shot to pieces in your next turn. So it's another really, really good mobility strat to have that in this detachment is going to get a lot of use and be really, really powerful for your already fast moving army. Overall, I think I would say it's a fairly solid detachment. It's a great base to build off. It's very similar to the already powerful, already popular Stormlance. Advance and Charge is very strong for any army, and this just gets you some extra utility on top of that by bringing Suboden, who does combo very, very well with it. You get some really good enhancements as well. You also get some very good stratagems, ones that improve your damage output, ones that significantly improve your durability. It is just a very, very good detachment and has a lot of choice and options and flexibility with how you want to play it. Obviously, a lot of the stuff is going to be great if you are going biker heavy and with lots of bikes and speeders and that sort of things. But some of the enhancements specifically have actually been changed from the Stormlance so that they aren't just a mounted character. So things like the Spear Point Paragon, that doesn't have to go on a mounted character, whereas the Stormlance version that it's copied from does. So you can still bring things like jump pack captains or that sort of thing and give them a bit more benefit in this detachment than they may get in the Stormlance. So I think it's really good if you just want to run a fast moving army that really wants to get into combat quickly or has a lot of bikes or speeders or jump infantry, then the Spearpoint Task Force is going to be one that will really benefit that. And if you want to get Suboden and bring him, along and you like the White Scars, then he's got pretty decent rules. I think he's fairly good for 115 points. He's going to make this detachment much, much better. And just thematically and fluff-wise, it is a perfect fit. As always, though, I'd love to know what you think of this detachment and also of Suboden himself. Have you tried out the detachment yet? Have you tried Suboden out yet? And if so, how did they perform? Let me know all of your thoughts and experiences down in the comments below. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me. But until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.